Welcome to my channel. If you are ready to fall asleep, let's start our story. You open your eyes slowly, as if the lids themselves have forgotten they were ever meant to lift. And as the dim, gray light of a morning not yet formed filters through what seems to be paper walls, soft and golden in its restraint, you begin to realize that you are lying not on a mattress, not in a bed, but on a thin layer of straw upon a tatami mat, and that beneath you the floor creaks not from springs, but from the faint shudder of old wooden beams breathing beneath their age, and that somewhere beyond those paper walls a crow calls once and then again, its voice lost in the folds of mist that sit heavy over the rooftops and gardens of a village you do not know, a world you have not seen, a time you cannot place but feel deeply in your bones, as though it has always been there, waiting, like a memory half remembered in a dream too fragile to hold. And as your fingers flex and find the texture of the woven mat, rough but comforting, and your nose begins to sense the soft, sharp scent of damp cedar mixed with ash and cold morning air, you sit up, not with alarm, but with a slowness that matches the pace of everything around you, for nothing here is in a hurry. Not the smoke that curls from the edge of a distant roof, not the steps of the person sweeping the earth outside your door, the faded footsteps that brought you here, nor the years that pass in the silence of such places. And as you sit fully now, legs folded beneath you, your head still slightly bowed from sleep, you notice the sound of a bamboo fountain, one of those shishio-doshi that fills slowly with water and then tips with a quiet thump, not loud enough to startle, only just enough to remind the garden that time still moves forward, even if no one watches it. And your eyes wander the room, its simplicity overwhelming in its quiet dignity. No decoration, no clutter, only a low table with a ceramic bowl beside it, a folded cloth, a basket containing a few withered persimmons, and a wooden bucket set near the door, as though someone left it there for you, though you don't know who or when. And as you lean forward, stretching your arms with the same care the trees outside must stretch their limbs toward the pale sky, you feel not fear, but the weightless sensation of unfamiliar peace, the kind that only comes when you are somewhere you are not expected, yet somehow welcomed, and the silence around you begins to shift, revealing itself not as absence, but as a presence of many small sounds, the faint brushing of wind against paper, the drip of yesterday's rain from the eaves, the distant, soft rattling of a wheelbarrow rolling over stones, and the muffled whisper of someone speaking in a tone too low to decipher, but warm all the same. And as your breathing deepens, your senses open further, and you understand that whatever your name was, whatever your life once meant, it has been set down for now, and you are this, a soul who has awakened in a quiet house in a misty morning in a 12th century Japanese village, and the day, like the fog, is waiting to unfold around you with the gentleness of silk. You rise slowly, not from haste nor duty, but from a deep sense that the world beyond the sliding door is still becoming itself. And as your hand reaches toward the smooth wooden rail that runs along the inside of the wall, you notice how the lacquer has been worn away, not by a single touch, but by hundreds, perhaps thousands, the polished patina of generations who have opened and closed this same partition with hands like yours. Some large and strong, some small and trembling, and yours now in between. Unfamiliar and calm, as if they already know how to move here. And as the door glides open with a sound like breath passing through an old flute, you are met not with brightness, but with the soft embrace of a white morning. The fog still settled, thickly around the wooden walkway, clinging to the eaves and curling between the thin bamboo poles that lined the edge of the garden. And for a moment, you stand there barefoot toes against the cool planks of the Ngawa and feel the temperature of the air. Not cold exactly, but damp with something ancient and kind, like a whisper too old to understand. And you step forward slowly, your foot pressing gently against the earth, which is not dry and not muddy, but soft, as if the night rains have offered their last gift to the soil before receding into silence. And the garden greets you not with color, but with texture. The low rustling of bamboo leaves shifting in unison like monks reciting a silent prayer. The occasional drop of water falling from a leaf and striking a stone with the gentlest of notes. The brush of a pine branch against the wall where it has grown too wide to be trimmed. And as you breathe in, you smell ash and moss, wood smoke, and something faintly floral, perhaps plum blossom carried from somewhere beyond the edge of the morning. And you begin to walk, slowly, each step deliberate, not because you are afraid, but because the stillness is so complete that you do not wish to break it, and you pass under the crooked arch of an old Tory gate that leans slightly to one side as if bowing to you in return, and beyond it, the village reveals itself in pieces, not all at once, but in layers, like a scroll slowly unrolling. A child crouched beside a stone wall, drawing lines in the dust with a stick. An old man sitting cross-legged beneath the eaves of a tea house, eyes closed, lips moving in a chant too low to carry. The smoke of a cooking fire rising from the window of a wooden house where a woman in silhouette moves with practiced grace, turning rice in a shallow pot. And no one looks at you, not directly, but they seem to know you are there, as if your presence does not need to be explained. And even the dogs, lean and quiet, do not bark, but only observe, blinking slowly before returning to their dozing. And you follow the path, not with intention, but with instinct, each bend and turn feeling familiar, though you have never walked it. And above you, the fog begins to lift in strands, revealing the jagged green silhouette of a nearby hill where stone steps vanish into a grove of trees. And somewhere far away, a bell sounds, not from a clock, but from a temple, its note long and low, vibrating through the mist as though time itself were ringing awake. And in that moment, you feel it. The world is not old, nor are you new. You are simply here, walking through a village that has always existed, waiting to be remembered by someone just like you. You follow the curve of the worn dirt path as it snakes gently between the houses, the thatched roofs leaning like old shoulders toward one another, as if sharing secrets passed down through decades of storms and sun. And with each step you take, the silence changes. It does not break, but unfolds. And now you hear more clearly the layered voices of a living place that never needed to shout to be heard. The creak of a cart-ass axle turning slowly around a corner, pulled by a white ox whose breath rises in soft clouds. The splash of water against smooth stone as a woman rinses vegetables in the narrow canal that winds through the center of the village like a silver ribbon. The muted laughter of children playing with wooden tops, their sandals scuffing the dust in circular patterns that disappear as quickly as they form, and the faint chiming of wind bells hanging from the corners of eaves, turning with the gentlest breeze into little tones that fade almost before they begin. And as you walk, you pass a narrow garden behind a low fence where tall green onions stand in neat rows beside early plum blossoms, and an old man with a broad straw hat is bent low, his hand steady as he prunes a branch with a short, curved blade, and he hums something you don't know but recognize, a tune that seems to have come from the earth itself. And nearby, a clay oven smokes as a fire is tended carefully by a girl no older than 12, who glances up only briefly, nods to herself, and returns to her work as though your presence, while unexpected, requires no explanation. And you continue forward, your steps now in time with the rhythm around you, passing beneath narrow wooden beams, beside shrines so small they fit in the crook of a tree's roots. There are red paint, faded, and offerings of rice and salt left reverently in tiny bowls. And the scent of pine smoke blends with the distant sharpness of fermenting soy, a smell do not recognize at first, but understand in your body as though it carries stories of hunger and patience. And as you reach the edge of the path, it opens suddenly to a wider clearing where a shallow river moves slowly over stones worn, smoothed by centuries of footsteps and rainfall, and beside the river, a small water wheel turns with a sound like someone breathing in their sleep. Slow and steady, always in motion, but never hurried, and beyond the river, a low hill rises where a single cedar stands wrapped in a thick rope of rice straw, with paper streamers dancing in the still air, a sacred tree, a silent watcher of this place. And at its base, a monk is seated, head, bowed hands, folded motionless in a way that feels alive, not like stone, but like still water, deep, quiet, knowing. And though you do not speak, you feel the weight of his calm wrap around you like a second fog, one made not of mist, but of memory and meaning. And you bow instinctively, not from knowledge, but from something older than knowledge. And as you turn to leave the clearing, a breeze passes through the trees and the sound of a flute, thin, wavering, high and ghost-like, dances above the treetops, a song not meant to be remembered, only to be heard once, just as you are now, once and never again, in a morning that will never come back the same way twice. You step away from the river and its turning wheel. It's the low hum of water and wood still echoing faintly in your ears. And follow a narrow path tucked between the reeds and the curved backs of thatched homes, until you reach a structure that seems to lean both into and away from the earth, neither abandoned nor entirely lived in, with walls the color of faded wheat and doors that breathe softly on their hinges as the wind nudges them inward. And as you pause before entering, your hand resting lightly on the rough wooden frame. You feel the coolness of age in the grain, as though the tree it came from never fully let go. And when you push the door aside, it slides with a sigh, revealing not a grand space, but a quiet one, dim and dusty, lit only by the filtered glow slipping through high, narrow windows where paper screens have yellowed with time and wear. And inside, there is no movement, only stillness arranged with care. Wooden shelves lined with small jars of ink and dried herbs. Tools with handles worn smooth by years of use. A scroll half unrolled across a low table, as if the writer had merely stepped away for tea. And in the corner, beneath a bundle of hanging reeds, a single zapu cushion sits on a mat that's been pressed flat by hours of silence. And though no one is here, you sense the room's memory of people, of someone who carved, copied, folded, and waited. And your footsteps make no sound as you cross the floor, each board gently giving beneath. Your weight like the surface of a quiet pond, and as you lower yourself to sit, your fingers brush a small object left on the edge of the table, a carved figurine of a fox, simple and smooth its expression, neither friendly nor fierce, but watchful. And beside it, folded paper, square, yellowed and sealed with a smudge of red ink, bearing no name, no mark, only silence, and you do not open it. Not yet, but leave it untouched, letting the stillness wrap itself around you like a blanket. For you understand now that this place was not meant for questions, only for presence. And even the dust here seems sacred, drifting through the golden air like slow, deliberate thoughts. And above you, from the beams of the ceiling, thin strings of dried flowers hang, brittle, yet still faintly fragrant. And you wonder how long they've been here, if the one who tied them had gray hair or none at all. If they sang while they worked, or wept, or said nothing. And as you sit there, hands in your lap, breath slow and deep, you notice that the light has changed, just slightly, softening from pearl to honey, and that outside the door, a single bamboo chime stirs, not from wind, but from the shifting of something else. Time, perhaps, folding quietly in on itself, as if to say, you have been here before, you'll be here again, but only if you sit still enough to remember. As you rise from the cushion and step once more into the outer air, you notice that the day has not rushed forward in your absence, but has lingered, stretching gently across the rooftops and fields in a slow golden tide. The fog, now thinner, pulled apart like worn silk, revealing slivers of blue above and the faint warmth of a sun that seems not to shine, but to hum, and your footsteps return to the path with the same quiet rhythm as before. But something has changed, not in the world, but in you. For now, you are not observing the stillness of the village. You are moving within it, not as a visitor, but as a breath belongs to the chest. And as you walk past the houses again, you begin to recognize their voices, the subtle tilt of each roof, the particular scent of each threshold, the delicate lean of tools left outside to dry in the sun. And from one doorway comes the sound of fabric brushing against wood as a woman arranges long lengths of indigo-dyed cloth over a bamboo pole. Her movements precise and unhurried, as though she has known this task since before she had memory. And as you pass her, your eyes meet not in greeting, but in mutual acknowledgement. A glance, not asking or answering, simply accepting. You are here. I see you. That is enough. And further along, near a quiet vegetable plot where low green plants shimmer with the last drops of morning dew, two boys sit opposite one another, threading tiny beads onto strings of hemp, not speaking, only pausing now and then to hold their work to the light, to compare, to begin again. And in the distance, beyond the edge of the village, you hear the long, low call of a wooden flute, not urgent, not loud, a tone that seems to weave itself into the very air, as though it has always been there and only now has chosen to be heard. And when you stop beneath the shade of a tree whose limbs arch over the path like the ribs of an old fan, you feel the slow pulse of the day in your own chest, each breath a mirror of the wind, each blink a reflection of the clouds as they drift like forgotten messages above the fields, and a child passes. You then know more than 5 or 6, carrying a bundle of sticks tied with cord, her steps, careful and measured, her head turned slightly to the side, as though listening to something only she can hear. And she does not look up at you, but her presence is enough to remind you that this village breathes in every direction, not forward into time, but outward into silence. And as you begin walking again, your hands at your sides, your body no longer stiff with foreignness, you pass a narrow wooden bridge where water runs shallow and quick over stones smoothed to silver, and from below rises the soft murmur of frogs shifting in the reeds. And you understand that no one here is alone, not truly, for the wind is always speaking, the trees are always listening, and the earth beneath your feet holds the stories of 1,000 mornings just like this, all unfolding slowly, deliberately, beautifully, as if the world were made for sleepwalkers. The sun has now risen high enough that the shadows lie close to the walls and beneath the eaves like folded fabric. And as you continue your path through the village, your body warmed not by haste, but by gentle exposure to time, you find yourself drawn toward an open space nestled between 2 quiet homes where a small wooden pavilion stands, its columns weathered but strong, its roof layered in moss so thick it seems to breathe, and within the pavilion sits a low platform, swept clean, upon which a single clay kettle rests above a bed of coals that glow with the steady patience of fire, tended not for heat, but for presence. And nearby sits a woman, her back perfectly straight, her sleeves tied neatly at the elbows, her hair bound in a dark cord, and though she makes no sound and speaks no word, her every movement is a language more ancient than spoken syllables. The way she lifts the ladle from the ceramic bowl, the precise arc of water poured into the kettle's open mouth, the soft click of bamboo against bamboo as she lays the tool aside and wipes the rim with a folded cloth of white linen, and you do not approach, nor are you invited. Yet you know you are permitted to watch, and so you lower yourself to the edge of the stone step, hands resting on your knees, and allow the ritual to unfold before you like the surface of a pond touched by a single leaf. K. And behind her, a thin line of incense sends a tendril of smoke into the air, twisting as it rises, fading, for it ever finds the sky. And in that smoke is cedar and something you cannot name. A scent both sharp and round, like memory pressed into form. And you understand, without being told, that this is not a ceremony for guests or gods, but for the day itself, a gift of attention given in return for breath and sky and soil. And as she lifts a small bowl, not yet filled, and turns it slowly in her hand, inspecting its shape, not with judgment, but with reverence, you feel the silence settle more deeply around you, no longer the absence of noise, but the fullness of stillness, the hum of the earth beneath your bones, and from somewhere far away, perhaps a courtyard behind you, or a window open to the wind, comes the delicate sound of stringed notes being plucked slow and deliberate, like the steps of a crane across water. And though you cannot see the source, the music weaves itself through the smoke, through the kettle's rising breath, through the careful motions of the woman who now pours the first measure of tea into the small bowl, lifts it in both hands, and holds it, unmoving, for a span of time not counted in seconds, but in presence, and then lowers it again, and you know she will drink, and then make another, and another, not for you, not for anyone, but because this is how one honors a day that asks for nothing but stillness in return. And you remain there, unmoving, a witness, not to a performance, but to a truth, that even in a village where time drips like honey, where no voice rises above the wind, where the sun itself seems to pause before it crosses the sky, there are moments where life, though barely visible, becomes so full it spills over the rim of the present, and you, simply by breathing, are part of it. The sun has turned its face gently toward the west now, and the shadows that once clung closely to the edges of rooftops have begun to stretch again, long and soft like brushstrokes of ink across parchment, and the warmth that once touched your shoulders has mellowed into something quieter, less insistent, and you find your feet moving once more, not by desire, but by some deep current within you that follows the shape of the day. And soon you are leaving behind the soft murmurs of the village heart, following a path edged by wild grasses and tangled vines, where no sandals have passed in days, perhaps weeks, and the air grows stiller, thicker, more golden with each step, until at last you come upon a space that does not announce itself, but simply waits, a clearing tucked between leaning trees and moss-covered stones, the center of which stands a structure barely taller than yourself, its roofs sagging with age, its walls warped, but intact, as though time had once begun to forget it, and then changed its mind. And beside this forgotten shelter lies a stone well, its mouth covered with a wooden lid bound by hemp rope. The edge is damp with the memory of recent rain, and you pause, not because anything here frightens you, but because the silence has deepened into something that listens back, and you kneel beside the well, resting your hand on its edge, feeling the chill of stone that has not known sunlight in generations. And as your breath stills, you think you hear something, not water, not wind, but the faint, distant rhythm of a dripping sound, like time tapping on the inside of the world. And when you stand again, you turn your gaze toward the little hut, a stepping across the overgrown threshold and ducking through its low doorway into a space where the light does not reach, but the quiet is complete. And within, you find little more than an old wooden chest pushed against the far wall. A bundle of dried rice stalks hung from a beam, and a clay bowl filled with pale stones arranged in a circle, each one marked with a symbol. You do not understand, yet feel as though you have seen before in a dream too old to revisit. And as you crouch in this forgotten room, the scent of damp earth and faded cedar fills your lungs, and you are overcome, not with sadness or wonder, but with a stillness so profound it feels as though your body has vanished and only your awareness remains, floating gently above the floorboards like smoke rising from incense left long ago. And as your eyes adjust, you notice faint lines etched into the wall. Not letters, not pictures, just shallow grooves made by fingers, or blades marks made not for communication, but perhaps to say, I was here, or I waited, or this too shall pass. And though you could stay here, forever suspended in the hush of a place unneeded, but never erased, you know it is time to return. And so you rise, passing once more through the low door, bowing slightly without knowing why. And as your feet return to the narrow path and the village comes into view once more between the trees, you realize you have changed. Not because something has happened, but because nothing has, and the space left by that nothing has filled you with a quiet that hums beneath your skin like a prayer no one ever taught you, but you somehow always knew. By the time you return, the sun has bent low behind the trees, and the sky wears the soft blush of evening, a faint lavender glow settling over the rooftops and fields. Like a quiet farewell whispered into the folds of silk, and the smoke from the evening cook fires rises in thin silver threads that disappear before they reach the clouds. And the sounds of the village have once again grown smaller, softer, retreating not into silence, but into stillness, the kind of stillness that does not wait, but rests, complete in itself. And as your feet carry you down the same winding path that once introduced you to this world, it no longer feels like discovery, but return, not like waking, but remembering. And you step beneath the arch of the Torii Gate again, though you do not recall exactly when you passed beneath it before. And the paper charms flutter softly in the breeze, as if acknowledging you. And as you pass the old man who once trimmed a tree, and the girl who now carries water in a clay jar, they do not greet you, yet something passes between you, a current, a weightless bow of understanding. And when you reach the threshold of the small house with the worn wooden frame and the rice paper walls, now glowing gently with the last light of day, you slide the door open slowly, feeling again the breath of it as it yields. And inside, the air is cool, not with the chill of absence, but the calm of continuity. And you step within, lowering yourself back onto the tatami mat where your journey began, the straw beneath. You somehow warmer, now more familiar, and as your hands rest in your lap and your spine folds, like the stem of a closing lotus, your gaze drifts once more to the paper wall in front of you, the same as it was, yet changed, because your eyes now carry the weight of quiet paths and listening trees and water wheels that turned without urgency. And you feel the day you lived, or remembered, or dreamed, settling into your bones, not as memory, but as presence. And the crow that once called in the morning now cries again in the distance, softer this time, lower, like a bell rung once and left to echo. And somewhere in the house, perhaps in a hidden corner, the bamboo fountain tips again, and its hollow knock folds gently into the silence, as if sealing the day, closed like a scroll returned to its shelf. And as your eyes began to lower, the weight of your body spreading into the mat like ink into cloth, you do not think about what this place was, or is, or might become. You only feel the hush of it all, and the rhythm of your breath joining with the breath of the house, of the garden, of the earth itself. And for a moment, perhaps longer, you disappear, not in fear, not in loss, but in perfect stillness, the kind that only belongs to those who never asked where they were, and yet somehow always knew. When the morning returns, it does so not as a surprise, but as a soft unfolding of light through the paper walls, as if the sun has remembered its promise to rise and has chosen once again to do so gently. And you open your eyes, not with effort, but with the quiet willingness of someone who no longer questions where they are. For now, you know, not in language, but in rhythm. And when the door slides open before you can rise fully from your mat, you do not startle, for the face that greets you is neither stranger nor friend, but something older, a man with shoulders bent like the branches of a plum tree, eyes lined like a riverbank, and hands that move with the certainty of earth and repetition. And though he speaks only once a few soft syllables you cannot name, you understand them fully, not because of their sound, but because of their timing. And you rise, stepping into the cool morning air, and follow him, along a path that curves like a brushstroke across the hillside, through bamboo that clacks softly in the breeze, down toward the fields that shimmer with early dew, where the earth has been marked into perfect squares filled with standing water, and narrow dikes run between them like the lines of a poem waiting to be read. And as you walk, your feet wrapped in straw sandals that crunch softly against the packed dirt, you feel yourself falling into step, not just with him, but with the land, the herons that lift off silently from the water's edge, with the frogs that press themselves flat beneath the reeds, with the breeze that slides along the paddies and never turns back. And when you reach the edge of the first field, the old man kneels, unrolling a bundle of tools wrapped in cloth, their wood dark with use their edges. It's clean but not sharp, and you kneel beside him, your hands uncertain but willing, and he passes you a weeder, nothing more than a curved piece of metal bound to a wooden shaft with twine, and points to a section of rice where green shoots rise in perfect rows from the mirrored surface. And you do not speak, nor does he explain, but you begin, slowly, rhythmically, bending forward, pressing the tool into the shallow water, pulling gently, rising again, stepping carefully along the dike, repeating, and time, which once moved like an idea outside of you, now passes through you, marked not by clocks or bells, but by the shifting warmth of the sun across your back, by the loosening of your shoulders, heralded by the feel of your breath deepening without effort, and nearby, other figures begin to arrive, silent and steady, some old, some young, all moving with the same unspoken pace. And though no one speaks more than a handful of syllables, there is music in the sound of cloth rustling of sandals on mud, of metal brushing root, and of water folding softly around each step. And, for the first time since you awoke, you feel not only welcome but needed. Not praised, not acknowledged, only included. And that is enough. And when the old man glances at your progress and gives the faintest nod before turning back to his own row, it feels more complete than 1,000 words, for it means you are here, you are doing, and the day in its quiet endlessness accepts you. The morning work continues until the sun begins to stretch longer through the open sky, soft warmth rising from the damp fields, and your breath grows slower, not from exhaustion, but from the soft rhythm that labor imposes. When one is no longer resisting the passage of time, and when the old man finally lifts his head and wipes his brow with the folded sleeve of his robe, he does not speak, but gestures gently toward a nearby copse of trees whose long shadows cross the narrow dikes like dark threads in an old tapestry. And you follow him there, moving slowly, your legs heavy, but not weary, your body alive with the simplicity of repetition. And as you step into the patch of shade, where tall grasses bend beneath a gentle breeze, he lowers himself onto a broad, flat stone as if it were an old friend, and you do the same, sitting not beside him, but near enough to feel the shared stillness. And the silence between you is not empty, but full of cicadas buzzing in distant branches, full of the quiet splash of a fish in the flooded field beyond. It's full of the leaves shifting like the breath of the trees themselves. And though he does not look at you, his presence is like a mountain's, undeniable, unchanging, and generous. And after a moment, he reaches into the folds of his sleeve and produces a small wooden cup and a gourd tied with twine, and he pours water, slow and careful, not a drop wasted, and hands the cup to you without ceremony. And as you drink, the water is neither cold nor sweet, but pure, and it carries something of the morning silence in it, as though the fog and dew and clouds have melted into this moment. And you hand it back without words, your hands still damp with earth, and he nods, not at you, but at the horizon, as if affirming something only the sky understands. And time drifts, slow and golden, the light filtering through the trees like threads of silk, unraveling across your face and arms. And you notice the way the shadow of a single leaf trembles on the ground. The way a spider spins a perfect circle between two low branches. The way your own breath now matches the rhythm of the wind as it slides gently across the water. And you think, not with thought, but with awareness, that nothing here is wasted. Not motion, not silence, not the space between two people sitting without speaking. And when he rises again, brushing his knees, and turns back toward the fields, you follow, neither invited nor dismissed. And as your feet step once more into the warm, shallow water, and your hands reach for the waiting plants, you realize that you have learned something from the silence. Not a fact or a rule, but a shape, a rhythm, a quiet agreement with the world that asks only that you listen long enough to disappear into it. When the fieldwork pauses once more and the day stretches beyond its quiet midpoint, the old man gestures, this time not toward shade or rest, but toward a narrow path that leads away from the paddies up along the ridgeline where trees grow thick and close, and though he does not follow, another figure appears, a younger one, wrapped in a plain robe, eyes downcast, but not unsure, and with a soft nod, they begin to walk, and you follow, your feet moving, not in obedience, but in quiet agreement. And the path, once wide enough for two, narrows into a trail softened by years of pine needles and fallen leaves. The trees pressing close like listening sentinels, their bark dark with moss, their roots rising and sinking like the backs of sleeping animals. And no one speaks, for there is no need. The forest speaks enough, the hush of wind threading through the high branches, the occasional flutter of wings far above, the brittle snap of a twig underfoot softened by the damp silence of the soil. And as you climb slowly, the air cools and the light begins to shift, no longer sharp, but filtered through layers of green and the scent of cedar and loam and something older. Something like stillness made into a smell fills your lungs with each breath, and time does not pass here. It pools, it drifts, it hovers like fog that never touches the ground. And when at last you reach a small clearing where a pile of gathered branches lies beneath a leaning tree wrapped with sacred straw, here companion begins to gather the wood, moving with care, never breaking, only lifting, only cradling. And you do the same, your arms soon filled with smooth, dry branches that carry the scent of rain long since fallen. And when the bundle is full, you lift it to your shoulder and begin to walk back. Slower now, heavier, not in burden, but in meaning. And the trees seem to nod as you pass, their shadows sliding across your face like passing thoughts. And in one moment, as the path bends around a rock, you glimpse through the branches the village below, tiny and quiet, wrapped in soft smoke and fading light. And something settles in you, something shaped like belonging, though it does not ask for name or reason, only presence. And you understand, as the first breeze of evening brushes the back of your neck, that the path you have walked is not new, but remembered, and that the weight on your shoulder is not just wood, but story, and the sound of your footsteps is not your own, but part of a rhythm that began long before you and will continue long after, as steady and soft as the fall of pine needles in a forest that never once needed to speak to be understood. As you descend once more toward the village, the bundle of branches pressed gently against your back, balanced with care but not strain. The path beneath your feet opens in slow folds, no longer a trail, but a memory unraveling one step at a time. And the forest around you seems to shift from vast to intimate, its trees leaning in like old friends who do not need to speak to be understood. And soon the narrow trail widens again, not into fields this time, but into a quiet glade at the edge of the settlement, where the air thickens with stillness and the light hangs in suspended breath. And there, beneath a great leaning pine, whose limbs sweep low like the robes of a sleeping priest, lies a circle of stones, not placed with precision, but worn into position by generations of passing feet. And at its center, a flat rock bears offerings so small and ordinary they might have been missed. A sprig of dried sakura, a worn coin dulled by time, a folded scrap of paper held down by a pebble, and without being told, your companion stops, bows slightly, not deep, not ceremonial, only enough to say, "I remember," and you follow. Unsure of what you honor, but moved all the same, and you do not speak, for this is not a place for speaking, but for pausing, a place that does not ask to be explained, only acknowledged. And when you rise again, the act of walking feels different, not resuming, but continuing something older than arrival. And as you near the village edge, the first sounds of evening reach you, the gentle clatter of bowls being rinsed, the low mutter of water spilling from bamboo spouts into hollow stones. Okay, and you pause again at a narrow trough, its surface rippling beneath the weightless fall of a stream fed by unseen hills. Okay, and your companion kneels beside it, sets down their bundle with the same reverence one might place incense before an altar, and dips both hands into the water, letting it run over fingers stained with bark and earth. Okay. And you do the same, the water cool and clean and utterly still, even in its motion. And though the gesture is small, something in it unravels the dust and quiet that is collected in your chest. And when your hands rise again, dripping like new leaves, you feel not refreshed, but realigned, and the wind shifts, barely enough to move a reed, but you feel it nonetheless, passing over your face like a forgotten name. And when you lift your bundle once more and begin the last steps toward the waiting rooftops, you do not carry it alone, for something unseen has joined you, some quiet thread pulled gently through the needle of the day, binding your silence to that of every other who ever walked this path, not as visitor, not as outsider, but as one who belongs, simply by being present enough to notice. When you cross the threshold of the low house near the base of the hill, your arms wrapped around the bundle of branches, now softened by the warmth of your body, the light inside is dim and golden, filtered through slatted windows and drifting incense smoke that curls like forgotten thoughts toward the ceiling beams, and the floor beneath your feet gives the faintest creak, not of protest, but of memory, as though it recalls every other who has passed this way with arms full of the forest's quiet gift. And you do not call out or wait for permission, for the door had already stood open. And in this place, welcome is not spoken, it is lived. And as you step into the main room, the walls lined with stacked baskets and folded cloths, the air smells of dried herbs and charred cedar, and from a corner near the hearth, a figure sits, not waiting, not watching, simply being. A woman whose hands move slowly over a small pile of millet, sorting grain from chaff with a rhythm so soft it barely stirs the silence, and she does not look up when you enter, nor do you expect her to. For this is not a moment of greeting, but of continuation, and you kneel by the fire basin, where a few coals still pulse with a red breath of the morning's heat, and you place the wood beside it in neat rows, not as offering, not as duty, but because that is what the moment asks, and you sit there for a while. your body folding into the room as the light outside deepens and the world narrows into quiet corners and slow gestures. And the woman continues her task, never hurrying, her face still and soft, her presence not demanding, but complete. And though you exchange no words, you feel something pass between you, not message, not meaning, but recognition, like a mirror held up to your stillness. And as the fire breathes a little louder, the warmth it gives off does not touch only your skin, but something below that, something quiet and long asleep, and you realize that in this house, in this hour, you are no longer a guest, no longer uncertain, and that the rhythm of your steps, the weight of your silence, the shape of your hands as they rest near the hearth, all of these have been seen before, or perhaps dreamed, or perhaps waited for. And when the woman at last rises and moves toward the next room, her sleeves brushing the doorway like wind through grass, she says nothing, and still you feel that something has ended and something else has begun. Though no line was drawn, no bell was rung, only the soft closing of a door behind her, and the breath you take afterward is deeper than any you've drawn since waking. For you have entered not just a house, but a place that knew you before you knew yourself. As the sky beyond the paper windows deepens into the soft indigo of evening, the room begins to glow, not with lamps, but with the low shimmer of the hearth where a clay pot sits above the coals, its lid rattling gently with a breath of slow, deliberate heat, and you sit nearby, your legs folded beneath you, your hands resting in your lap, watching as steam rises like a memory from the pot's narrow mouth, curling into the air and vanishing just before it reaches the darkened beams above and beside you. The same woman from before moves with quiet certainty, lifting small bowls from a stack, rinsing them with a ladle of warm water, placing them one by one upon a low wooden tray with the care one might give to sacred instruments. And you do not offer to help, not because you are unwilling, but because there is nothing to add. Everything already moves with its own rhythm, and your stillness is part of it. And when at last the food is ready, a bowl of rice, a slice of simmered radish, a handful of mountain greens dressed in sesame, she places it before you with neither smile nor command and sits beside you. Her own tray, a mirror of yours, and for a long moment neither of you moves, as if waiting for the day itself to bow and depart. And then, slowly, she lifts her chopsticks, and you do the same, and you eat. Not as one who consumes, but as one who listens, right? Quiet, each movement soft, the sound of the fire gently shifting in the hearth, like an old song sung from behind a paper wall, and you feel something in the meal that is not taste but presence, the weight of the soil from which the radish came, the coolness of the stream where the greens were washed, the hands that washed the rice with circles of water until it gleamed like pearls. And you understand, without words, that to eat here is not to take, but to join, not to fill, but to remember what emptiness feels like when it is welcomed, and the meal passes slowly, not measured in bites or minutes, but in glances and breath, in the subtle hush that settles between two people who need nothing more than the warmth of food and the closeness of silence. And when the bowls are emptied and the last grains of rice are lifted carefully from their corners, She gathers them without ceremony and rises, and though you remain seated, the quiet between you has grown fuller, as though something was spoken through the chopsticks, through the warmth of the broth, through the stillness of your posture. And when she disappears once more into the back room, and the coals sigh beneath the pot, now empty, you feel the moment close, not like a door, but like a tide, withdrawing from the shore of your breath and leaving behind something soft and sacred. Like salt on skin, like warmth on stone, and in that residue, in that hush, you realize that what you shared was not a meal, but a belonging, and the taste it left behind was not flavor, but time. After the bowls are cleared, and the fire in the hearth fades into a slow breath of ember light, you step outside, sliding the door softly behind you, and the night meets you not with cold or darkness, but with a softness so deep it feels like a blanket lowered over the world. And you walk a few steps down the narrow stone path that leads to a small open space beside the house, where a flat stone waits beneath a tall tree whose branches sway gently, though you cannot feel the wind, and you sit not because you are tired, but because the stillness asks you to. And as your body settles, the silence does not feel empty, but full of the subtle symphony that only night in a quiet village can compose. The layered rhythm of cicadas buzzing like distant fire, the occasional knock of bamboo against bamboo as a wind chime turns softly on its cord, the hush of leaves shifting above you like the breath of a sleeping sky, and you do not think of anything, not because you choose not to, but because your thoughts have unspooled and vanished like smoke, leaving only sensation, only presence. And the darkness is not frightening, for it is not complete. Small lights glow in distant windows. A lantern sways faintly near the gate, and the moon, nearly full, begins to rise slowly behind the hills, painting the edges of the roof with silver. And in this moment, you realize that time has not stopped, but deepened, like a pool that no longer rushes forward, but simply holds. And the silence becomes something more, not the absence of noise, but the presence of meaning, a vast open space in which your breath becomes part of the night, your heartbeat part of the rhythm. And somewhere beyond the garden wall, a bell chimes once, distant and soft, its echo drifting into the trees like a prayer let go. And you close your eyes, not to sleep, but to see more clearly the shape of this moment, the way it rests within you like water in a clay bowl. And you feel, perhaps for the first time, that you are not watching the world, not even walking through it. You are inside it, made of the same silence, the same light, the same fading day. And you smile, not with your lips, but with your breath, and the night folds itself around you like a garment you have forgotten was yours all along. When at last your body begins to cool beneath the breeze that slips gently between the branches, and your breath becomes a little slower, a little heavier, as though the night itself has entered your lungs, you rise from the stone where you sat and walk without thinking, without deciding, back toward the house whose walls now glow faintly with the golden hush of a single lantern within. And the door slides open with barely a sound, as if it had been waiting for your return without concern or question, and you step inside. Leaving your sandals at the threshold, your movements slow, not from fatigue, but from reverence, for the silence in this room feels deeper now, thicker, as though the air has wrapped itself around every object and sound in careful stillness. And the mat where you will sleep awaits you as it did before, unchanged, yet somehow transformed. Like a stone warmed by a day you have already forgotten, and as you lower yourself onto it, the thin cushion yielding to the shape of your spine and shoulders, your arms resting at your sides, your legs falling into stillness, you feel the weight of the day not pressing down, but settling through you like fine dust, like ash from a fire long extinguished, and you do not search for dreams, nor fear their absence. For the breath that moves in and out of you now is not yours alone, but part of the breath of the walls, the tatami, the trees outside and the mountains beyond. And as your eyes close, the sound of a single bamboo chime swaying in the night air reaches you, soft and hollow, a voice without urgency, and the insects still sing in slow pulses, their song no longer distinct, but absorbed into the quiet. And even the fireflies, though you cannot see them, seem to pass beyond the paper walls in arcs of slow green light, unnoticed but present, and you feel not sleep coming toward you, but yourself dissolving into sleep, as though you are no longer one person in one place, but a part of a larger silence that remembers you, that holds you without grasping, that sings to you without song. And the last thing you feel before the world vanishes into the hush of rest is not an ending, not a closing, but a return, not to where you were or who you were, but to the quiet place within. You that has always been waiting for this stillness to arrive. You rise before the sky is fully light, stirred not by sound, but by an absence of sound, that quiet pull that feels like a rope around your breath, drawing you up gently from the warm weight of dreams into a room that is already empty, already awake, the sleeping mat beside yours neatly folded, the coals in the hearth stirred to life, but untended, and as you step outside, the village is not bustling, not noisy, but alive in a different way, as if it has already passed through the day's first breath without waiting for you, and now moves on a current you must catch without splashing, and you notice small things first, because it is all you are allowed to notice. A flat stone near the threshold, brushed clean of dust, though no one is near. A folded leaf, placed at the base of a tree, as if laid down by wind, but facing too precisely east. A bowl of water set beneath a bamboo pipe, with a single floating petal inside it, spinning slowly counterclockwise, and you walk softly, instinctively avoiding certain flagstones, though you cannot say why, stepping around a coiled rope left in the middle of the path that no one seems to touch. And near the well, you see an old man bowed 3 times in 3 directions, the final one held longer than the others. His face turned not to the rising sun, but to the shadow behind a shrine barely taller than his waist, and he does not glance at you or acknowledge your presence, for what he honors is not shared in language, and you begin to understand, not with your mind, but with your posture, that some things are not explained, because their meaning is older than explanation, and that the village lives not by rules, but by rhythms, by alignments, by quiet gestures woven into the fabric of motion, and you walk slower now, not out of caution, but out of reverence, tracing your path between doorways and trees, not as a visitor, but as someone aware of the space you take, the sound your steps make, the places your eyes rest, and everywhere you see signs, not warnings, not directions, but fragments. A circle of ash beneath a rock, a hanging cord with knots, tied in threes, a line of salt brushed into a corner and swept half away. And no one tells you what they mean, but somehow you feel them settling into the space behind your ribs. The quiet knowledge that you are walking through a place that remembers more than it explains, and that your presence here is accepted only because you have stopped asking to be taught. Later that same morning, with the mist still clinging to the undersides of leaves and the paths, not yet fully warmed by sun, you walk beyond the familiar houses and rice fields, past the garden walls and the rows of drying herbs, following a narrow trail that seems neither used nor forbidden. It's a kind of path that exists between intentions pressed into the earth by generations of hesitation. And the deeper you walk, the quieter the world becomes, not in absence, but in withdrawal, as if the bird song and breeze and distant voices choose to remain behind, letting you enter a different layer of the day. And there, tucked beneath the bend of a hillside, where the trees begin to lean more anciently, you find it, a low structure, half stone and half wood, the roof bowed and shingled with moss, the doorway sunken into shadow and wrapped with vines that seem to grow in slow, deliberate circles. And though it is small, the space it occupies feels wide, as though the air around it thickens with memory. And you do not step inside, not out of fear, but because some places are entered with the eyes first. Okay. And what you see tells you that this was once touched daily. The smooth wear on the threshold, the faint soot on the eaves, the way the door's edges are darkened, not by weather, but by fingers, and beside it, a stone basin half buried in leaf litter still holds a thin pool of rainwater, clear and unmoving, and floating in its center, as if placed by wind or prayer, is a single red camellia petal, too perfect to have landed by accident, and above it hangs a bell, cracked and green with time, its clapper missing. Yet still it sways slightly when the wind reaches the corner, and you feel not a presence, but a pause, a moment in the breath of the forest where something once spoken remains unsaid. And though no path continues beyond it, no sign names it, you linger there, not to question, but to absorb, to let the silence of the place press softly into your skin like mist into cloth. And as you turn to leave, you feel it not in your ears or mind, but in your bones, that the structure is not abandoned, only retired, not forgotten, only left alone. And that somewhere in the stillness of its shadowed doorway, something remains seated just beyond your knowing, waiting not for visitors, but for reverence. And you carry that weight with you, not as a burden, but as a thread gently looped around your breath, tying you back to something older than memory. The path back to the village is not the same one you came by, though it winds through the same trees and crosses the same slope. In the morning light, now higher in the sky, has cast the forest in a clearer tone, but with that clarity comes a strange kind of weight, as if the forest, though beautiful, is no longer sleeping and along the trail. You begin to notice things that were either not there before or had not yet revealed themselves, such as a line of stones placed precisely along the edge of a stream, each one flat, pale, and set at even intervals like a quiet sentence written in the language of water, or the circle of white ash raked into a spiral in the center of a clearing, so delicate that even the breeze does not disturb it. And you do not stop to question these things, for they do not ask to be known, only noticed. And further on, you see a small tree whose lowest branches have been tied with strips of faded cloth, red, blue, pale yellow, each one fluttering so faintly it seems they move not with the wind, but with memory itself. And you wonder, not with curiosity, but with stillness, whether these pieces of fabric are prayers or warnings, or simply fragments of moments someone else needed to mark, and you do not approach them nor reach out, because the space around them feels defined not by walls, but by attention. And as you move again through a narrower stretch of path, where the undergrowth brushes against your legs and the smell of moss and bark grows thick, you come upon a flat stone etched with shallow grooves, not letters, not images, but patterns, concentric and interwoven, their meaning unfixed, their presence undeniable. And though part of you wants to kneel, to trace them with your finger, you do not, because something in you now understands what it means to walk among things that were never made to be explained. And so you pass them all, the stones, the ash, the cloth, the carvings. As one passes a gate, they are not meant to open, aware not of their purpose, but of their presence. And in that awareness, something inside you shifts, not loudly, but deeply, as if a door within you, long closed, is simply begun to breathe. And you keep walking, each step slower than the last, not from fatigue, but from reverence, your eyes no longer seeking, but receiving. And though no one watches you, and no voice speaks, you feel seen, you feel heard, not as a person among people, but as a shadow among shadows, quietly recognized by a world that only reveals itself when you stop trying to understand it. When you return to the village, your steps softened by the soil, and your breath deep with the scent of pine and smoke. The morning has passed into that gentle hush between labor and rest, when the air begins to hum with the promise of noon, and the light falls evenly across rooftops and woven fences, and you see the villagers, not all together, but scattered, as always. A woman kneeling beside a row of green onions, a child sweeping dust in front of a gate to men, passing bundles of straw over a low wall, and everything seems to unfold as usual, the kind of usual that has. It's been polished over generations into something sacred, and then, without signal, without sound, without any reason you can name, it happens. Every person pauses at once, not frozen, but held like reeds in a windless moment before the current shifts again, okay? And each of them from opposite corners of the village, without turning to face each other, moves with the same motion, subtle and slow, bowing their heads just lightly, or lifting one hand to their chest, or closing their eyes for the length of a breath, as if acknowledging something unseen, unheard, but undeniably present. And the moment lasts only as long as a blink, perhaps less. And then, as if the thread were cut, all return to what they were doing. The broom moves again, the straws passed, the knife returns to the chopping block, and no one speaks, no one looks around to see if the others had done the same. Because it is not a performance, not a ritual in the way you understand rituals. It is more like a breath shared by many lungs. A silence passed like water through unseen pipes beneath the village stones. And you stand there, your hand still, your heart unsure whether to race or slow. For you have seen something that feels both deeply private and utterly natural, as if the earth itself had exhaled through human bodies for one sacred instant. And yet no one reacts, no one explains, and when you catch the eyes of the child with the broom, he only smiles faintly, not as if hiding a secret, but as if inviting you into the quiet understanding that there are no secrets, only things you Haven-Tees stopped long enough to feel. And so you walk on, carrying that moment like a smooth stone in your chest, heavy, not with weight, but with meaning that needs no name. The night is heavy with quiet when you awaken, not startled, not summoned, but gently lifted from sleep by something less than sound and more than silence. And the room is steeped in shadow. The soft shapes of beams and mats and cloth-wrapped bundles barely visible in the moonlight. That slides across the floor like water, remembering where it once flowed. And you rise without knowing why, without question or hesitation, and step into the outside air that holds the stillness of a bell just before it rings, and the village sleeps around you. Roofs bow like resting animals, doorways closed but unguarded. The bamboo fences casting slow-moving shadows that seem to breathe with the breeze. And you walk, not in haste, not with purpose, just drawn to the edge of the houses, to the rise of the small hill where the path widens and your sight stretches into the soft dark. And it is there, as you pause beneath the crooked pine, that you see it. A figure, alone, standing on the slope beyond the last rice terrace, lit faintly by moonlight, but far enough that no features can be seen, only the outline, still, straight, quiet, as if carved from shadow itself. And though the figure does not move, you feel with an intimacy you cannot explain that it is watching something, not you, but something beyond the hills, or within them, or within itself. And you do not call out, you do not wave, for the moment is not yours to touch, only to witness, and you do not know how long you stand there. It's only that the clouds pass slowly behind the figure's outline, and once, just once, it shifts, a slight turn of the head, perhaps, not towards you, but slightly away, as though it has acknowledged a presence behind it, or perhaps a thought, or perhaps nothing at all. And then it returns to stillness, and you feel no fear, only a quiet weight, as though something ancient is taking place, or has always taken place in that space between presence and absence. And you turn, because that is what feels right, not as retreat, but as acceptance. And as you walk slowly back through the sleeping village, your steps almost silent against the earth, you understand without understanding that some things are not meant to be approached, not because they are forbidden, but because they are whole in their distance. And the image of the lone figure on the hill does not fade from your mind, even as you lie back down and let your body fall once more into the warmth of rest. It stays with you, not as a question, but as a presence, a shape without name that somehow feels like part of the world you were always meant to dream inside. The morning light finds you slowly, threading its pale gold through the edges of the reed walls and the wooden slats, brushing your skin with the gentleness of breath returning after long sleep. And when you open your eyes, the room is exactly as it was. The hearth, dark and still. The folded mat where someone else once slept undisturbed. And yet, something beneath the sameness hums with quiet difference. Like a familiar song played half a tone lower, and as you step outside, stretching limbs that feel slightly longer, slightly heavier than they did the day before, you notice how the light falls differently, not drastically, but subtly, as though the sun has chosen a gentler angle, and the shadows cast by the garden fence are softer, more uncertain in their edges. And you begin to walk without purpose, past the same doors, the same baskets of drying herbs, the same well whose water still reflects the sky, but your eyes catch details you be certain were not as they are now. A line of stones, once arranged in a tight curve, is now broken. One missing, the water in the trough runs just a little faster. The cloth over a doorway is no longer blue, but a pale shade of gray, or perhaps it always was, and you never saw it clearly until now. And no one speaks of any change. The villagers move as always, calm and without urgency, their gestures smooth. But the rhythm beneath their movements seems half a beat slower, as if everyone is listening inwardly to something you can't hear. Or perhaps they are letting silence do the listening for them. And you remember the figure on the hill, the way it stood so still in the moonlight, and you glance toward that ridge now, but there is no one there. Only the wind brushing through the grass in slow waves. And though the hill is empty, you feel no absence, only a presence that has dispersed, like ink in water, becoming part of everything. And you realize that you are not looking for answers anymore, that you have, without knowing when, stopped needing to understand and started simply receiving. And the change you feel around you is not in the world alone, but within your own perception of it. And the stones and the shadows and the sound of the stream are not strange now, but familiar, not because they explain themselves, but because you no longer resist their mystery. And when you return to the house and sit quietly beside the hearth, you feel something settle in your chest. Not certainty, not knowledge, but a deep, slow peace, the kind that does not need to be named, only carried. It is sometime in a late afternoon when your steps, unhurried and unplanned, lead you along a narrow side path you had passed many times before without noticing. A path bordered not by trees or fences, but by worn stones and shallow dips in the earth that seemed more like memories of a trail than a trail itself. And as you follow its slow, uneven turns, the air grows cooler, and the light takes on a deeper hue as if filtered through time itself. And at the end of the path, tucked between two ancient cypress trees whose roots grip the earth like fingers, remembering something long buried, you come up on a wall, not of a house, but of something older, something half collapsed, and moss covered. Its stones fitted together with a care that time has respected, and in its face smoothed by centuries of wind and lichen. There are marks, not words, not images, but grooves, shallow and looping, etched with a precision that feels both accidental and intentional, as if they had been carved not to be read, but to be touched. And you do touch them, slowly, your fingers tracing the lines the way one might follow the edge of a sleeping river. And as you do, something within you stirs, not understanding, but recognition. The quiet thrum of something ancient brushing against the edges of memory. And though the marks say nothing in any language you know, they speak with shape, with rhythm, with space, and you feel in your bones that they are not decoration, not warning, but remembering things no longer said aloud, patterns of thought and ritual once known not by the mind, but by the breath. And behind you, the trees creak softly in the wind, as if listening. And when you step back, the wall remains unchanged, silent, undemanding, and you wonder how many others have stood here, fingers on stone, listening, not for words, but for silence, and how many have walked away carrying nothing they could describe, and yet everything they could hold. And when you return to the path and the village beyond it, you did not speak of what you found, not out of fear, but because you now understand. Some knowledge is not for sharing, it is for shaping the space between thoughts, for softening the lines between self and world, and the marks on that wall, though unreadable, now live in your breath, your step, your stillness, and that is enough. That night, long after the lanterns are out and the wind has curled itself back into the mountains, you lie upon your mat, not quite asleep, not quite awake. Your breath slow and steady, the rhythm of the crickets a distant murmur in your thoughts. Once full of the day's quiet strangeness, now drift like leaves on dark water, separate and weightless. And it is in this space, this hollow between dream and memory, that something begins to form. Not like a vision, not like a sound, but like a presence folding itself around your awareness, so gently that you cannot say when it arrived, only that it is already there, already with you. And you feel the warmth of light, though your eyes are closed, a glow that comes not from outside, but from somewhere just behind your breath. And in this light, there's movement, or perhaps suggestion of movement, something passing through air as still as glass, and a voice, maybe, or the ghost of one, not speaking words, but breathing them, soft as dust falling through moonlight. And though you strain to listen, there's nothing to hear, and though you try to see, there's nothing to look at. And yet, the experience is real, not because it can be described, cut, but because it touches something in you that was waiting without knowing, and you do not ask what it is, you do not name it, for the moment, resist. Naming resists capture, and even as it happens, you feel it dissolving, slipping through the spaces in your thoughts, like smoke returning to air. And when you wake, if wake is what this is, the room is unchanged, the mat beneath. You cool the walls, still shadowed in the blue hush of pre-dawn, but something inside you pulses with a new quiet, a silence not of absence, but of being gently filled, and you lie still, not moving, not blinking, letting the weight of what might have been rest against your chest like a smooth stone from a river you have no name for. And though you will not speak of it, not to yourself, not to anyone, the feeling remains, not memory, not dream, but something shaped like both, held without holding, known without knowing. And as the first bird calls and the light begins to press at the edges of the paper wall, you close your eyes again, not to sleep, but to stay a little longer in the place that does not exist, but somehow always was. It is not the sound that draws you this time, nor the light, nor even your own footsteps. It is something quieter than intention, a pull that feels like memory shaped without content, like the way a bird turns its head toward wind that has not yet arrived. And on that morning, the mist still lined like breath across the earth, and the sky holding its pale blue as gently as water holds a reflection. You walk toward the farthest edge of the village, to where the trees begin to lean in again, and the footpaths grow narrower. And there, where the earth slopes gently toward a grove of crooked bamboo, you see a small dwelling, more like a shelter than a home, its walls dark with age, and its roof curved low as if bowing to the ground itself. And seated before it, not working, not meditating, not waiting, is a figure, old and motionless, wrapped in layered cloth that blends into the tones of weathered wood and faded earth. And they do not turn as you approach, do not acknowledge your presence with sound or movement, and you stop a respectful distance away, not from fear or politeness, but from something deeper, an instinct born of atmosphere, as if this person belongs not to the village, but to the space around it. And you stand there, not looking directly, but seeing, not listening for words, but for the shape of silence that hangs around them like mist hangs around mountains. And in their stillness, there is a kind of gravity, a center of quiet, so complete it draws your own thoughts into slower orbits. And you realize, without being told, that this one, this elder, does not speak, because what they know is not spoken, cannot be spoken. It is not meant to be transferred by sound, but only by presence. And as you remain there, watching without watching, the breeze moves through the bamboo behind them, creating a pattern of shifting lines in the air, and the birdsong fades until even it respects the hush. And in that moment, you understand that there are people who live not on the edges of society, but beneath it, beneath the words and stories and explanations, like roots beneath a forest. It's unseen, but holding everything steady. And this person, this silent one, is part of that root system. And though you eventually turn and walk away, your feet soft against the stones, you carry something with you, not knowledge, not emotion, but a resonance, as if their stillness has entered your own breath, slowing it, deepening it, leaving behind not a message, but a space where one might grow. It is later in the week when you return, not because you plan to, not because you seek answers, but because something in your feet remembers the way, the path that curves gently through bamboo, past a leaning post half swallowed by moss, to that quiet dwelling where time no longer lives in hours or minutes, but in the slow breath of leaves and the shape of dust resting on stone. And once again, you arrive to find the elder seated just as before, body wrapped in faded cloth, back straight, hands resting on knees with the stillness of stone, warmed by years. And this time, you do not hesitate. You do not even think of hesitating. You simply stand where you stood before, as if your body knows its place here better than your thoughts ever could. And the light filters differently today, falling in long bars through the trees, dust dancing in them like memories not quite remembered. And everything is the same, but also not. For now, the silence feels closer, as if it is no longer between you and the figure, but around you both, like a room without walls. And as you wait, breathing in the deep quiet, you see the elder move. Not suddenly, not deliberately, but with the kind of motion that belongs more to air than to muscle. One hand, aged and thin, lifts slowly and brushes a small stone beside them. Not to move it, not to point, but simply to acknowledge it. And then the hand rests again, and the stone remains unchanged. And yet, something in you stirs, not because the gesture was meaningful, but because it didn't need to be, and you realize that you were not watching for action, not hoping for signs, but simply present, open, still. And that in this stillness, you have begun to share something unspoken, a rhythm, a resonance, a mutual understanding that does not require proof or exchange. And you stay longer this time, long enough that your breath slows to match the hush around you, long enough that the wind forgets to blow. And when at last you turn to leave, the figure does not follow your movement, does not mark your passing, and yet you feel, without seeing, that they know not where you are going, it's not who you are going, but that you are there. It's ended your silence, however new, was honest. And when you return to the village path, the noise of chickens' children and chores seems almost foreign, not unpleasant, but distant. And you carry the weight of the moment, not like a thought, not like a story, but like water in cupped hands, fragile, sacred, and known only by the one who holds it. When the dawn is pale and soft, and all the village seems paused between breaths, you wander once more, drawn not by curiosity, but by the quiet insistence of presence, along the narrow lane beside the communal well, where until now you have only glimpsed dust and patterned shadows. And there, seated on a low bench of weathered cypress, is another figure, an elder woman, whose back is bent like an old scroll, and whose hands rest on her lap. Knuckles pale and steady, yet she is not bent by age, but by the weight of something unseen. And as you approach, you notice that her feet never touch the ground, but hover just above it. And though her gaze is fixed on the distant hills, her ears seem to listen to something closer, something inside you. And when you pause a respectful distance away, the earth itself hushes, as though it too wishes to observe. And the silence here is different from the one at the shelter. It is fuller, more intimate, as if it holds memory and grief and joy in equal measure. And you feel the pulse of it in the air vibrating softly in your chest. And for a moment, you imagine speaking to ask her what she hears, what she feels, what she knows. But your lips remain still, because you realize that words would shatter this delicate stillness like a stone dropped in calm water. Okay, and so you simply stand, breathing in time with her, and in the rhythm of your shared silence, you sense something ripple through the morning, an echo of a laughter long gone. Okay, whisper of a song never sung, a truth that will not be named of, though the woman never moves, never acknowledges your presence. You leave her with the conviction that she has given you a gift, not advice, not wisdom, but a space in which words are unnecessary, where understanding is not spoken but felt. And as you turn away, the bench beneath her seems to hold an absence, so tangible it glows in the air behind you, and you carry that glow with you, a silent ember in your heart, guiding your every breath. Later that day, the sun hangs low, and the village's hush deepens into the soft hum of shadows lengthening across doorways. You find yourself drawn to the edge of the communal garden, where roses climb a wooden trellis, and there, beneath the tangled blooms, sits a child, no older than 7 or 8, knees drawn to her chest, hair tied in a single loose knot, and she does not play nor stand, but simply watches the world with eyes both wide and serene, as if she understands things too vast for words. And when she notices you, she does not blink or flinch, but remains exactly as she is, still, attentive, and utterly present. And you pause beside her, unsure whether invitation or permission is needed, but find neither is, for her calm holds no boundary, and together you sit in silence, listening to the rhythm of petals falling on stone, the soft tilt of the wind brushing through her hair, in the faint murmur of a distant bell echoing through the village. And in that stillness, you realize that in her quiet, there is a knowing more ancient than any story told by elders, a wisdom woven into the spaces between leaves and breaths, and you feel its shape inside you, soft as shadow and clear as light. And though you could ask her anything about the world beyond the hills, about the secret rules she keeps, about the song she carries in her chest, you do not, because you understand that her silence is not emptiness, but full, a container for meaning that cannot be poured out, but only entered. And as you rise to leave, the child's gaze follows you, unwavering, as though she has seen you not only as you are, but as you might become. And in that look, you sense a promise that even when voices fall away and words dissolve in the hush of night, the soul speaks on in soft shapes and silent songs. Okay? And that this, more than any spoken truth, will guide you home. As dusk deepens into the soft indigo of approaching night, you find your steps leading beyond the last cluster of homes to a low stone, clear platform beneath an ancient cedar whose boughs fan out like a dark umbrella. And there you see him, an old man, seated cross-legged, wrapped in a simple gray cloak, his spine straight as the trunk that shades him, and in his lap rests a small wooden box carved with unrecognizable symbols. He does not look up as you approach, nor does he brush aside a single fallen leaf. Yet you know he has sensed you, for the air around him hums with a quiet presence. You pause a respectful distance away, not daring to break the stillness he has summoned. And in the hush, you feel the weight of your own heartbeat, slow and deliberate, as if matching his, and you understand that this figure, this guardian of silence holds vigil not over the village, but over something deeper, the fragile spaces between sound and meaning, between thought and being. And though he does nothing but sit, the day's last light seems to bend toward him as if seeking his counsel. And behind him, the cedar shadows stretch into patterns on the ground like intricate script, telling a story no one reads, yet all know. And as you stand there, you sense the wooden box shift ever so slightly in his lap, as though it breathes, and you would lean in to glimpse its carvings more clearly, but you do not, because to look too closely would be to break a vow unspoken, and instead you bow your head, not to him, but to the silence he embodies, acknowledging that there are guardians of more than gates and temples. There are guardians of absence, of unspoken truth, and in honoring them, you honor something within yourself that cannot be named, but only felt, and as you step back, your breath falls away like a held note, and the world resumes its gentle cadence. Crickets begin their song, the cedar sighs in the breeze, and you carry with you not an answer, but a question so profound it dissolves the need for answers. And in the quiet that follows, you realize that in this place, every silence is a prayer, every pause a blessing, and every guardian, whether human or tree, cage, teaches the same lesson, that the deepest speech is spoken without sound. Before the sun has fully faded, you follow a narrow lane beyond the cedar and bamboo grove, winding between low stone walls mossed over with age, until you come upon a small temple tucked into the root-knotted earth. Its sliding doors closed, but its presence unmistakable, radiating a quiet gravity that hums beneath the hush of cicadas. And at its entrance, you find another silent sentinella, young novice, barefoot, kneeling on the worn threshold with palms pressed together, head bowed, that you glimpse only the dark curve of hair tied back in a simple knot. Yet the very air around them vibrates with a kind of living stillness, and as you stand just beyond the eave's shadow, you feel the stones beneath your feet shift ever so subtly, as though they, too, were breathing in time with the novice's silent devotion, and without moving, without speaking, have become aware of every whisper of wind threading through the roof's wooden beams, every faint echo of footsteps long since vanished, every trace of incense smoke that once curled toward an unseen deity. And in that space where human and stone meet, you sense a dialogue written not in words, but in weight and resonance, in temperature and echo. And though the novice never lifts their gaze, never opens their mouth, find yourself offering a silent bow not of deference, but of communion, because here, in the stillness of a sacred place, you understand that silence is not absence, but presence multiplied, that every rock and every breath holds a teaching if one only listens without expectation. And as you turn to leave, your footsteps are light, as though you carry the temple's calm within you, a resonance that will ripple through your bones long after the path has faded behind you. As twilight deepens and the world narrows two shades of gray and silver, you feel an impulse to rise above the village's quiet pulse. So, you follow a winding trail that leads beyond the outer fields and upward toward a gentle rise crowned by a solitary pine. its silhouette etched against the dimming sky, and there, seated upon a flat stone at the very crest, is someone wrapped in a dark cloak, their face turned toward the horizon where the last glow of sunset clings to distant peaks. And though you cannot see their features, you recognize them by the stillness that surrounds them. Silence so vast it seems to stretch into the heavens themselves, and you approach as if in a dream, feet making no sound on the soft earth, and you sit a respectful space away, neither side speaking, for words would scatter the hush like birds startled into flight. And together you watch as the sun slips behind those mountains, leaving behind a pale afterglow that fades into the deep velvet of night. And in that shared quiet, you sense the weight of all who have watched that same sky across lifetimes, across centuries. Their hopes and fears folded into the deepening dark, and though the wind rises now, tousling your hair in the stranger's cloak, you feel not a chill, but an embrace. It's as if the world itself draws you both into its silent arms. And in the vastness of that moment, perched between earth and sky, you understand that the highest stillness is not found in solitude alone, but in the meeting of two silences, in the space where one heartbeat echoes another, and you close your eyes, breathing with the rhythm of the pine and the pulse of the land, until the stars appear pale pinpricks of light in the boundless dark, and you rise to leave. The memory of that shared quiet cradled in your chest like a small, luminous stone. With the night fully claimed by moon and stars, you descend the slope by torchlight, each step guided by the soft glow and the echo of that final stillness, until you reach the familiar threshold of your small house, its paper walls illuminated from within by a single lantern's flicker. And as you slide the door open, the scent of incense and cooled earth welcomes you, and you step inside, not as an intruder, but as someone returning to the heart of themselves. And there upon your tatami mat, you kneel, bowing your head to the floor, your cloak catching the air in a soft sigh, and when you lie back down, the world you leave behind folds into the quiet of your breath. For now, you carry the presence of every silent figure you meddler and novice, child and guardian, stranger upon the hill and watcher at duskus, threads woven into the very fabric of your being. And though your eyes close for the last time in this waking, the hush does not end but begins anew. A cycle of stillness without edges, without borders, without need for words. And in that infinite pause, you dissolve, not lost, not forgotten, but merged with the vast and gentle silence that always was.